Whilst perhaps the talks on seals and sea lions are this afternoon, I have the pleasure of talking to you about what I believe is the world's greatest small cetaceans, the porpoises. And for those of you who know me, you'll know that I've been working on these animals for quite some time. And during the course of my graduate research, there were a number of challenges that kept cropping up. And they weren't specific to me. It was for people working on porpoises around the world and meeting people at conferences. And we would all have the same complaints that access to the literature on porpoises is very, very difficult, and unless you happen to be at a big university like I was at University of British Columbia. Having communication between researchers, even just being able to find out who else is working on these very small, very difficult to find, and geographically usually disjunct species. So after finishing here at UBC, and continuing on with research, it came to light that what we really, really needed, what was missing on planet Earth, was in fact an organization that was dedicated to the research and conservation of porpoises. It was a gaping hole. And luckily, I was fortunate enough to be involved with a group of people who were like-minded, and we formed the Porpoise Conservation Society. And we wanted to think big. For the world's littlest cetaceans, we wanted to think global. So it took us a bit of time and a bit of effort and deciding what are the ways that we can really help these animals and what do we need. So first of all, of course, you have to have a website. You just have to. And so we have the only website that I know of that is dedicated to the world's 7 species of porpoise. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you can find there, and I hope it's helpful and I hope you may visit it. The mission of the Conservation Society is that we work for the protection and conservation of all of the species of porpoise on this planet and their natural habitats, and we do so through outreach, through education, and through research. Now, the Porpoise Conservation Society has a local base. It's based right here in southern British Columbia, but we have an international scope. And as I've mentioned, we are the only group on the planet that is focusing entirely on these species. And this is a Dall's porpoise. It's a fantastic photograph that was contributed to the Society. And you can find us and some of these photographs at porpoise.org. And our scope, as I've mentioned, is all 7 species, from the beautiful Burmeister's porpoise of the Southern Hemisphere to the finless porpoise of the Indo-Pacific. And one of the things that we had realized was that when you go and you try and find what are the distributions of these 7 species, for even animals that are in, say, British Columbia, there's really very little fine-scale data. There's little snippets here and there, but by and large, if you look at the range of any of these species, there's huge swaths of ocean, usually coastal with the exception of spectacle and Dall's porpoise, in big bands. And yet, from experience with harbor and Dall's porpoise, we know that's not true. There is fine-scale variation. And so the Porpoise Conservation Society developed a global reporting platform that's available online, and anybody can report their porpoise sightings. And the goal with this is to eventually be able to pinpoint some of these hotspots, as with the work I did here in British Columbia, the areas that are incredibly important to the different species, so that we can help refine some of these maps, the habitat distribution, which of course is absolutely imperative for effective conservation. And our society is quite new. We've just had our first anniversary back in May, and we're getting sightings already from all over the world and from places that we wouldn't have expected, that perhaps wouldn't have heard about us. For instance, in the UK, we're getting quite a few sightings from there, sightings reports. And so our database is growing, and we're able to start pinpointing certain locations just at the very early stages of the reporting platform, of sites that perhaps for graduate students or researchers might be areas that would be important habitats to start looking at. If you see a porpoise, of course, please recite it to the Sightings Network here through the Vancouver Aquarium, but please also report it to porpoise.org. There it is again, just in case. Now, it is very important, of course, to recognize that these animals are small, they're difficult to find, and we need money. And we just recently were granted charitable status through the Canada Revenue Agency, which is fantastic news. Our international work has been focusing on vaquita, which of course is the most critically endangered cetacean on the planet, with a current population estimate of 53 animals and declining. The reason for this is bycatch in illegal fisheries. This year we participated in the International Day to Save the Vaquita, which was on July the 9th, and we co-hosted an event with the Vancouver Aquarium here in Vancouver. And we were one of over 30 venues around the world, ranging from Canada to New Zealand. And the result of this international effort was Mexico implementing a full ban of gill nets throughout the full range of the vaquita. And since that is the single most important threat, this was a huge action. Our international collaboration with this species ranges from young children in preschool to fisheries, and we are now combining forces with on-the-ground efforts in the Sea of Cortez, or near the Sea of Cortez, and we have our first planning meeting next week as to what we can do for artisanal fisheries. We're also working with groups in Scotland and Wales, and we have a research program that's being set up in Scotland at one of the first special areas of conservation for harbour porpoise. That'll be commencing next year, and it's going to be building on 28 years worth of research that has already been conducted in Scotland. And we're also working on photo ID, because even though they're small, difficult to find, and incredibly difficult to photograph, we are finding that there are some individuals that can be monitored. And I had the pleasure of attending the first annual Porpoise Symposium, sitting in a room of people all dedicated to the conservation of porpoises. Fantastic. I also want to very quickly tell you about the Black Sea, because this has flown under the radar. The Black Sea population of harbour porpoise is actually a distinct subspecies. It's one of 3 around the world. They are listed as endangered by the IUCN. The coasts of Bulgaria and Turkey are known breeding grounds, and in this past summer, there was a mass mortality with over 300 neonates stranded along the shores of Turkey and Bulgaria. It's thought that their mothers were caught in bottom set nets for turbot, and these animals starved to death and washed up on shore. This is not the first mass mortality, but this is the biggest one on record. We are working with colleagues at the World Bank and the IUCN to try and figure out what the Porpoise Conservation Society here in BC can do to help the people working along the Black Sea coasts of Turkey and Bulgaria. Our other resources, we have an online research library that has 818 documents, all about porpoises, various species, various researchers, and our library is growing, and it's available free online to anybody. We're also developing a photographic catalog from around the world of all the 7 species, and this is available to everybody. So for the students in the room, we hope it helps. So if we've got your interest, which I hope we do, please use our website. Please contribute any papers that you may have, photographs, and report your sightings. And of course, Christmas is coming. We are charitable. If you have somebody on your list who has absolutely everything, have they adopted a vaquita? We can help. We also have fantastic stocking stuffers. Our brochures are available, and they're free. This work could not have been done without a tremendous amount of hard work by some of the people in this room, and my incredible thanks to all of them and to you for your time. And even the universe knows small cetaceans are incredibly important. This was taken by NASA. It is the dolphin galaxy. I am positive there is a porpoise one out there somewhere. So thank you.
Okay, well, I think then we'll have a chance to catch up with you at the break. I had no idea. What was that website again, Anna?